these pathways that we're going to need, we're going to need to make sure that the fibers have the ability to exit to meet the viscera of the body that it needs to meet. One of the things that your textbook does, and it sends a little bit of information talking about the difference between what we have learned about the somatic pathway, meaning the pathway to our skeletal muscles. I wish they would leave it alone, okay? Anyway, so it does a contrast between how information gets to a skeletal muscle versus what is going to take place for the autonomic system. In that somatic pathway, which we have talked about already, okay, but this chapter does it again. We know that we get information from a motor neuron. We get that from the brainstem or the spinal cord, goes by way of the axon, which will be myelinated because it's a spinal nerve, and it goes to a skeletal muscle and synapses. All right? And the skeletal muscle contracts. In the autonomic pathway, all right, once again, let's think about the anatomy portion. We need that route of the spinal nerve because this autonomic system has to exit and it has to make its way to the chain. All right? So we're going to say that the signal has to travel to neurons to get to the target organ, because we're going to say that it needs to get to a ganglion, which is the bump stuff that they're showing, okay, the stuff in pink, and then make its way to the target cell. So we're going to have a synapse that will occur where the neurons meet in what is termed the ganglion. And they're called autonomic because we're dealing with the autonomic nervous system. So that tells me the fiber that is going to make its way to the ganglion is termed my presynaptic fiber. And then wherever the fiber goes from the ganglion to whatever organ it needs to go to is my post fiber. Is everybody with me on what it means to be presynaptic? Meaning pre, and then it'll synapse somewhere in a ganglion, and then it'll go to the organ, and that's the post fiber.
It happens in the same ganglion, though, right?
What do you mean, same
Well,
thing?
the ganglion is just like the group of them all, like the mass, or is it each individual one inside that mass?
Now, a ganglion means that that is an area of nerve cell bodies.
Yeah.
So if you look along the chain, there's not tons, but there's ganglia located all along the
And it's
chain.
the bulges, like the sacs of all of
Yes.
them concentrated. So the pre and the post, they happen, like there's still just like the one ganglion, so it happens in the same ganglion.
Yeah. So if you think about your pre-fiber, think about the body and the dendrites are over here, fibers leading into the ganglion. So that's going to be the terminal ends of my pre. And it's going to meet dendrite nerve cell body of my post, and the terminal ends of the post land at the target.
Okay, so like one sac of them is going to have both pre and post, and they're different, but they're
Because
both
that's
in the
my
same.
area of synapse.
Okay, cool. I gotcha.
Yep. So you will have the pre-fibers, terminal ends, synapse on dendrites of the post. and it'll be the terminal ends of the post that meet the target, meaning the organ and gland. Yes, no?
Yes.
Okay. Now, once again, that's a representation. Like I said, your textbook does this. This is the representation of my somatic where it made a skeletal muscle contract. In my autonomic, we have our pre-fiber that exits, makes its way to a ganglion, synapses. My post-fiber makes its way to the target and synapses. Okay? So they say it's 2 neurons rather than 1. They're trying to show you the difference. Okay? I just not going to spend a whole lot of time on that. So these pathways, all right, that we get, I think in your textbook, they give you this table that shows you a comparison. The reason they're doing this, in the somatic system, meaning it goes from that area to a skeletal muscle, okay? Do you happen to remember what the neurotransmitter was that got released in the synapse from the nerve meeting a muscle? That area of synapse. Do you remember what the neurotransmitter was?
Acetylcholine.
It was acetylcholine, the ACH. That can, acetylcholine, okay, that's what's getting released at the nerve to the muscle. It was always excitatory, meaning it always excited the skeletal muscle. Now, moving into our autonomic system, we're not just dependent on ACH. We can have other neurotransmitters present. And they can be excitatory or inhibitory. If you inhibit, what do?
Stop.
You stop. Hold up. How many divisions am I dealing with now? 2. One of them was excitatory or inhibitory.
Excitatory.
And one of them was
Inhibitory.
Make sense? So, the neurotransmitters that are now going to be present can either be excitatory or inhibitory, because we need to do one or the other for the targets, for these target cells. We need to either excite them or we need to inhibit them. So our neurotransmitters are going to be able to do that. So, these 2 divisions. Sympathetic, parasympathetic. Fight, flight, calm down. So, sympathetic. In the handouts that I had for you with the pictures, get the one that says sympathetic. Okay? Now, can't find my copies. Okay, so, sympathetic. Sympathetic, sympathetic, not sympathetic at all. also called thoracolumbar division. Take a peek at your picture. On the sympathetic side, on this division, do you see how they've got the little green lines exiting the spinal cord? And then they're entering into my ganglia on the sides, okay? Do you see how they've got, what areas of my spinal cord are they showing them coming from? My thoracic and lumbar. Therefore, fibers for my sympathetic division come from the areas of the thoracic or lumbar region of the spinal cord. Now, they go and they move and they move and they go and they move and they go. That's how they are serving areas of the body they meet. For the most part, they're pre-fibers. The ones that they're trying to represent to me in green, the pre-fibers are relatively short. The post-fibers, which they're trying to represent to me in the red, are long. Does everybody see that difference? Now, this takes us back, I think, to the very first chapter we talked about. Does everybody remember that when we looked at the cross-section of the spinal cord, and in it we had the butterfly, okay, and we had our somatic information come in on the dorsal, leave on the anterior, but I pointed out those lateral horns on each side? This is where I'm talking about. So if you go back to thinking about that cross section in the spinal cord, is that on the back? Yeah, not great, but okay. On the back of the page, remember the butterfly belonged to my somatic. The ones that are lateral, that they're trying to show, like right here to each side, because lateral means to the side, not the median, not the midline, okay? Those are my lateral horns, and they deal with my autonomic nervous system. So, neurosomas, nerve cell bodies of the pre-fiber, the green, because it's going to exit from that area of the spinal cord, their nerve cell bodies are in that lateral horn.
Anterior lateral horn, like the one in front.
Well, lateral means to the side.
Okay.
So when you look, you see the horns on each side of that butterfly.
Right.
So it's not necessarily anterior or posterior, they're just on the side.
Okay.
Okay?
Oh, I see.
Okay. Like we just looked at, fibers exit in the thoracic and the lumbar regions. Now, here's where we look at some of our ganglia. They can go to they do. They're going to go to sympathetic chain ganglia on both sides of my spinal cord. But do you see green